Welcome back to Notes of Curiosity, exploring ideas that matter. I'm Alex, and this is Eve.
Hey, everyone.
This time, we're taking a look at Erich Fromm's The Art of Loving, which, we've had on the list for a while.
Yeah, it's been requested quite a bit.
And for good reason. This book, it came out in 1956, but it's still incredibly relevant today.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, think about how often we hear love talked about, like it's this, magical thing that just kind of happens to you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like it's fate, You just find the right person and boom, you're in love.
Right.
Yeah.
But Fromm, he comes in with this totally different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, hold on, love isn't passive. It's something you do.
An active thing.
He says it's an art to be mastered.
Like painting or playing an instrument.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty radical idea, I think, to treat love as a skill, something we can actually work on and get better at.
Definitely. Especially back then, in the 50s.
Right. Fromm was writing after World War II, like when the world was dealing with so much trauma and division.
Yeah, so much healing needed to happen.
And he was basically saying, hey, love isn't just this fluffy feel-good thing. It's the answer to some of our biggest problems.
Like a key to solving those big human struggles.
Exactly. He saw the inability to love as like the root of a lot of the world's problems. And he makes some pretty bold statements in the book.
He does. Like right off the bat, he says, is love an art? Then it requires knowledge and effort.
Straight to the point.
Yeah, no messing around. He even says, the inability to love is the central problem of human existence.
Whoa. That's a heavy statement.
It is. But if you really think about it, so many conflicts, whether it's between people or even whole countries, come from a lack of understanding and empathy, real connection.
It's like we're missing that basic skill of loving well.
And Fromm, he's saying we don't necessarily just know how to do it. We've got to learn and practice.
So that's where this whole idea of love as an art comes in.
Yeah. He uses the analogy to show that love takes discipline, concentration, being patient and willing to learn as you go.
Like, you wouldn't expect to just become a master chef overnight. Exactly. You don't pick up a guitar and suddenly you're Jimi Hendrix. It takes years of practice.
Right. And love's the same. It takes time, effort, messing up, and trying again.
Fromm also talks about how our ideas about love have changed over time. He talks about this shift from finding the right object to, really emphasizing romantic love.
Oh, yeah, that's a fascinating part. He explains that in older societies, love was often connected to things like social standing or economics.
Practical stuff, making sure families were stable and everyone was taken care of.
Exactly. Marriage was often about, supporting each other, managing a household, not so much about intense feelings.
And then romantic love came along and put all the focus on individual choice, passion, being emotionally fulfilled.
Which sounds great. Right?
In theory, yeah. But Fromm points out some downsides, too.
Oh, absolutely.
He saw this big focus on romantic love as maybe setting us up for disappointment.
Yeah, because it creates these super high expectations. Like, love should always be easy and effortless, which is...
Not reality.
Right. Real life is messy and complicated, and relationships take work.
And Fromm doesn't shy away from that, does he? He's very realistic. He says, love is not primarily a relationship to a specific person. It is an attitude, an orientation of character, which determines the relatedness of a person to the world as a whole.
So it's bigger than just finding the one.
It's about cultivating a way of being in the world.
A loving way of being.
And that ties back to his whole idea that the biggest problem we face as humans is overcoming separateness.
Yeah, that's a core idea for him.
So what does he mean by separateness?
He's talking about that feeling of being isolated, alone, that feeling of being disconnected from other people, from nature, even from something bigger than ourselves.
That longing for connection, for belonging.
Exactly. It's what drives us to form relationships, build communities, try to find our place in the world.
To find meaning.
He calls this yearning for union a basic human drive.
But he doesn't stop there.
No. He goes on to say that not all connections are the same.
So there are different types of union.
Yes. He talks about organic union, symbiotic union, and then mature love.
All right, let's unpack those because those are some pretty big concepts. What's organic union?
He uses that to describe the kind of union you see in nature, like the bond between a mother and a baby.
So it's like instinctive, natural.
Yeah, just a pure merging. But Fromm says that kind of union can't last forever. As we grow up, we need to move toward a different kind of connection.
Which is where symbiotic union comes in.
Right. And this is where things can get a little tricky. This type of union, it's more about dependence, maybe even clinging to the other person. One person can lose their individuality in the relationship.
Like those couples who are so intertwined they can't function without each other.
Exactly. They almost become one entity. And Fromm says this can be unhealthy because it stops individual growth and can lead to codependency.
So what's the healthy alternative? What does good union look like according to Fromm?
He calls it mature love. And this is where things get really interesting.
I'm all ears.
Mature love is about keeping your individuality, but still achieving a deep sense of oneness with another person.
So not merging into one blob, but two distinct individuals coming together, choosing to be together.
He describes it beautifully. In love, the paradox occurs that two beings become one and yet remain two.
Whoa, that's powerful.
Uh-huh.
So how do we get there? How do we go from those like less mature forms of union to this mature love?
Fromm says it all starts with facing our existential loneliness.
Ooh, getting philosophical now. What's existential loneliness?
He's talking about that very deep feeling of separateness that we all experience as human beings. It's like this feeling that at our core, we are alone in the universe.
Deep stuff.
And he says we have to face that feeling head on. We can't just run from it or pretend it doesn't exist.
It's like leaning into the discomfort.
He thinks by acknowledging our loneliness, we can start to overcome it. And, the path to overcoming it, according to Fromm, is through love.
So love isn't just about feeling good or finding a partner.
It's about tackling this fundamental human problem of feeling disconnected.
Wow. He's really raising the stakes here, saying that love is essential to our well-being, both as individuals and as a society.
Exactly. And once we understand this big problem of human existence, Fromm then goes on to explore different forms of love. He believes that each type offers a different piece of the puzzle, when it comes to mastering this art of loving.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. Let's dive into these different forms of love.
Sounds good. We can start with two foundational types that Fromm believes shape us from childhood: motherly and fatherly love.
Intrigued. Let's unpack those first.
So Fromm sees motherly and fatherly love as these two distinct but totally complementary forces in how a child develops. Motherly love, it's all about unconditional acceptance.
That feeling of being loved just because you are, no matter what.
Right. It's like your mom always has your back. He even calls it the home we never leave. That sense of belonging and security that helps us learn to love others.
A safe haven where you can just be yourself.
Without judgment. Fromm actually says, motherly love by its very nature is unconditional. It's that love that says, I will love you no matter what.
Powerful stuff. And then there's fatherly love, which Fromm sees as a bit more conditional.
Yeah, he contrasts it with motherly love. He says fatherly love is conditional in the sense that it must be deserved.
So it's more about setting boundaries,
Yeah,
teaching responsibility, and preparing us for the world outside the home.
right. It's that love that says, I love you when you're trying your best, when you're striving to be a good person.
Makes sense. It's like tough love sometimes.
But Fromm's careful to say, though, that these roles aren't necessarily tied to gender. It's not like all mothers are nurturing and all fathers are disciplinarians.
Right. It's more like an archetype, a
Yeah,
pattern.
exactly. These fundamental patterns that shape us. It doesn't matter who's actually filling those roles, parents, grandparents, whoever.
So ideally, we get a good balance of both motherly and fatherly love as we grow up.
Right, because both are essential for healthy development. Motherly love gives that security and belonging, while fatherly love teaches structure, discipline, responsibility.
It's like we need both roots and wings. Roots to feel grounded and wings to, fly.
I love that. Rama believes these early experiences of love set us up for how we love others later in life.
It makes sense. If you've never felt unconditional love, it's got to be hard to give it to someone else.
He even goes as far as to say, without love, humanity could not exist for a day. Pretty powerful statement.
It is. So we've got these foundational types of love, motherly and fatherly, and then Fromm goes on to explore other forms of love, the kind we experience as we go out into the world, right?
Exactly. And the first one he digs into is brotherly love, which he calls the foundation for all other forms of love.
Brotherly love. So like my actual brother.
Not quite. Fromm uses brotherly love to describe that sense of care and respect that we should have for all human beings. Responsibility for each other.
Like recognizing that shared humanity,
Hmm.
that we're all connected.
He puts it simply. Brotherly love is love for all human beings. And it's based on this fundamental understanding that we're all interconnected, all worthy of respect.
It's like when you see someone struggling and you just want to help, even if you don't know them.
Yes. Seeing the inherent dignity in everyone and treating each other with kindness and compassion.
And Fromm argues that this kind of love is so important for a healthy society.
Oh, absolutely. It's the antidote to things like division, hatred, and conflict.
It's about building bridges, fostering understanding, making sure everyone feels seen.
And valued.
Okay, so we've covered motherly love, fatherly love, brotherly love, and then, of course, we can't forget erotic love.
Yeah, yes, the kind of love that inspires countless poems and songs.
So what does Fromm have to say about this kind of intense, passionate love?
He describes it as the craving for complete fusion, for union with one other person.
That feeling of being completely drawn to another human being, wanting to know them totally.
And to be known by them in return.
But Fromm also points out that erotic love, while amazing, can be a little tricky, right?
He's really clear that erotic love shouldn't be mistaken for mature love. He sees it as this powerful force that, if it's not balanced with other forms of love, can lead to jealousy, possessiveness, even dependence.
It's like that saying, love is giving someone the power to destroy you, but trusting them not to. Intense.
Erotic love is definitely intense, but it needs to be grounded in things like respect, trust, and a healthy sense of self.
And this is where self-love comes in, right? Fromm emphasizes that too.
He does. And he's not talking about being narcissistic or self-absorbed, but about having a healthy respect for yourself, appreciation.
Knowing your worth, setting boundaries, being kind to yourself.
Exactly. He says the love of others and the love of ourselves are not alternatives. So you can't truly love others if you don't love yourself first.
It's like they say on airplanes. Put on your own oxygen mask before helping others.
Right. Self-love is crucial for our well-being and for healthy relationships.
And then finally, Fromm talks about the highest form of love, love of God.
He sees this as the ultimate expression of love. A love that goes beyond our individual ego, connects us to something bigger than ourselves.
And this isn't necessarily about religion, is it?
Not at all. Fromm describes it as devotion to something higher than oneself, whether that's a spiritual belief system, a cause you're passionate about, or even nature.
Surrendering to something greater than ourselves, feeling awe and wonder.
Recognizing our place in the grand scheme of things.
And this kind of love, for Fromm, is what gives our lives meaning and purpose.
Connects us to the infinite, reminds us we're part of something much bigger than ourselves.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. We've gone over Fromm's ideas about the problem of human existence, how our view of love has changed over time, and all these different forms of love that shape our lives.
A pretty comprehensive look at love.
Absolutely. But there's one key piece we haven't gotten to yet. Fromm's critique of modern society. He doesn't pull any punches when it comes to analyzing how our culture impacts our ability to really love.
He's super critical of what he calls the marketing orientation of today's world. He argues that capitalism pushes us toward alienation and treats people like products.
So instead of seeing each other as unique, valuable individuals, we start to see people in terms of how useful they are, their economic value, how many followers they have.
Yeah, like we're constantly comparing ourselves to others, trying to keep up with the Joneses, whether it's about material things or, like you said, social media.
And this commodification of human connection, for Fromm, it leads to these shallow, superficial relationships. There's no depth.
We focus more on what we can get from others instead of what we can give. And he sees this as a huge obstacle to experiencing true love.
So how do we combat this? How do we resist those pressures of a culture that often seems to value material things and superficial connections over real human connection?
That's the big question, isn't it? And that's exactly what we're going to explore in the final part of our deep dive into the art of loving.
So we've talked about all these different types of love and how our modern world can make it hard to really connect. But the big question is, how do we actually, put this all into practice? How do we actually live this art of loving?
And this is where Fromm really delivers. He doesn't just give us these big ideas and then leave us hanging. He gives us a way to actually cultivate love in our daily lives.
Okay, I'm ready for some practical tips. Where do we even begin?
Well, Fromm starts with becoming more self-aware, really understanding ourselves.
Makes sense.
He actually says awareness of ourselves, of our limitations, of our ambitions, of our illusions, and of our real needs. So he's asking us to look inside and really understand our own baggage, our needs, the things that maybe scare us in relationships.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of work. I mean, where do you even start with all that self-reflection?
Yeah, it's definitely a process. And Fromm's not giving us a quick fix. He wants us to look at our patterns. Do we tend to push people away? Do we have these unrealistic expectations? That kind of deep self-reflection, that's where the real work begins.
So it's about figuring out our blind spots, the things that might be stopping us from experiencing real love.
Exactly. Taking off those rose-colored glasses and seeing ourselves and our relationships in a more honest way.
And once we've done that inner work, then what?
Fromm talks a lot about taking responsibility in love. He says, love is the active concern for the life and the growth of that which we love.
So it's not this passive feeling. It's a choice we make.
Absolutely.
Hmm?
We have to realize that we're responsible for our own happiness, and love is something we choose every day. Showing up for the other person, supporting them, nurturing the relationship.
It's about giving, not just taking.
Exactly. And it's not about keeping score or anything. It's about genuinely wanting to make the other person happy, help them grow. And it doesn't have to be these big, grand gestures.
Yeah.
It's the small things, listening, encouraging them, being willing to compromise.
The little everyday things.
Yeah.
Fromm also talks about respect as a key part of love. He says, respect is not fear and awe. It denotes, in accordance with the root of the word responsary, to look at, the ability to see a person as he is, to be aware of his unique individuality.
Respect is so important. It's about really seeing the other person, accepting them for who they are, quirks and all. It's about valuing their opinions even when you don't agree, making them feel safe to be themselves.
So it's not about trying to change them, make them fit into some image we have in our minds.
Nope, it's the opposite. It's about realizing that we're all unique, and those differences are what make relationships so amazing.
And we've been talking a lot about romantic love, but Fromm's idea of love goes way beyond that, right?
Yeah, he believes that practicing this art of loving, it should be in every part of our lives. How we treat our families, friends, the people we work with, even strangers we meet.
So it's about cultivating kindness and compassion, feeling connected to everyone.
Exactly, like a ripple effect. The love we build in our personal relationships can spread out and touch the world around us.
And that's a powerful idea, especially in a world that feels so divided sometimes.
For sure. Fromm reminds us that love isn't just about feeling good, it's about creating a better world, a more just, compassionate world.
Wow, this deep dive into the art of loving has been incredible. Fromm's work is so rich and thought-provoking. It's definitely made me think about love in a new way.
Me too. It really makes you think. This is one of those books that stays with you.
So as we wrap up, is there one key takeaway you hope our listeners will take with them?
I think Fromm would want us to remember that love is a practice, a journey, not a destination. It's this constant process of learning, growing, and discovering more about ourselves. And it's not always easy, but it's the most rewarding journey we can take.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the art of loving. We hope you found it helpful and inspiring.
This is Alex and Eve.
Until next time, keep those notes of curiosity flowing.